please read the roll?
Sure. Chairman Anderson,
Present.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Here.
Ms. Balson Alvarez,
Here.
Ms. McNeil,
Here.
Mr. Delory,
Here.
Councilmember Miniger is excused, Vice Chairman Zucker,
Here.
Mr. Formicelli,
Here.
Mr. Stern,
Here.
Mr. Bell.
Here.
You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2023 notice, in which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by posting properly such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Please be advised that this is a non-smoking building. Fire exits are to my right, your left, and the back of the room. This is a scheduled meeting of the planning board. There may be other meetings currently running simultaneously with this meeting. If you are not here for the Senate Planning Board, your meeting may be upstairs or elsewhere in the building. And we'll see how many people exit the room after I said that. That's in pretty good shape.
Everyone has remained in the room who was in the room.
All right, shall we go to the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. All right, so tonight we have a relatively modest agenda. I guess we'll, with the agenda that we have, we maybe actually will follow the agenda this time. Usually I move things around, but it looks like a pretty well put together here. Thank you, Stephanie. I guess we'll address, Matthew, maybe you can help us with the legal notice there.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, regarding the resolution, the zoning board's not to exceed amount is higher than the planning board's. So last month's resolution listed the zoning board not to exceed amount, not the planning board not to exceed amount. So you'll see the resolution we're passing tonight is to add an additional $10,000 to the not exceed amount of $25,000. We have it in the budget beyond that, except we contractually, as a municipality, set a not to exceed amount. And this is just housekeeping to clean up that it had been 35, and it really should be set at 25. So the resolution lists the not to exceed at 25, and the resolution will add 10,000 not to exceed through the rest of the year.
And we would need a voice vote for this? Again, or is it just a correction here?
I would do a roll call just to officially add it to the
Okay, all right.
I was hesitant to weigh in because I don't want to unduly.
Or the party.
Yeah, exactly.
Given an arguable interest in the outcome of this, but a roll call, procedurally only, a roll call would be
Yeah,
held.
I guess since we had voted on it once, I wasn't sure whether we would do that. So yes, we'll do roll call, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we would need a motion.
Yes, can we have a motion to approve and a second?
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Matthew. All right.
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. Balson Alvarez.
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
For legal fees, sure.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, thank you. All right, moving down to our meeting minutes. Has anyone reviewed, or does anyone have any comments based on your review of the meeting minutes? And there was the revised meeting minutes that you received on your place tonight indicated an additional sentence that Stephanie added from the original one, which was relating to the idea of creating a subcommittee and working together with the zoning board and between planning board and zoning board. So thanks, Stephanie, for doing that. That's good. I appreciate that. The other question I had really was, maybe I'm missing something, but it seemed like when we went to the Bristol-Myers Squibb review, I don't remember, have we always included all the exhibits, description of the exhibit?
Yes.
Yeah, it seemed like it, kind
there
of
were
went on.
There were like 20.
Yeah, it went on for a long time, and I
Yeah,
guess
there were
it's,
22.
I guess it's because we don't usually have
Yeah, we don't
that many
usually
exhibits.
have that many.
All right, it just seemed like it was kind of long, and do you think of all of the comments for each of the, they're very detailed, very accurate, so I'm not criticizing that, I'm just wondering if it could be shorter, or if anyone on the board had the same reaction that I did to the Bristol-Myers Squibb, description in the meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add is be responsible for answering Oprah requests.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will see the minutes,
Yeah.
and a lot of times their questions can be answered by simply seeing the minutes because it details the exhibits.
Yeah.
So from a procedural perspective, having some of that detail in the minutes can save a lot of time on requesting additional transcripts and other documents. That's a bit of information that the board wouldn't be aware of,
Yeah,
not
no,
having
that's-
fill
that's
Oprah
an interesting
requests.
point I hadn't thought about.
And I'm sorry, Matt,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's because the exhibits themselves remain online, so people can
Well, I
access
mean, the
them?
exhibits do, but sometimes if somebody's looking for something very particular, the minutes encapsulate everything that occurred in a very précis version, rather than the transcripts, which are every word, or those don't always last online forever. We
Yeah.
do eventually retire them from the website once
Mhm.
they go to construction, so this is kind of a way to make sure that it's all contained in one document in a way that doesn't have them going to the transcript.
Okay, all right.
Um,
Okay, so then, we'll, keep the format as it is, makes sense to me. And with regard to Mr. Hiscano, it's Dwight Hiscano, and we've gone back and forth in two places, one place or the other. It is Dwight, D-W-I-G-H-T, not Michael. And I know it shows up in the resolution as Michael, so it is actually Dwight, D-W-I-G-H-T. And if anyone wants to acquire some beautiful photographs, Dwight is a award-winning photographer. Has had exhibits in noted museums and private collections. Just as a plug for Dwight's business. He's very
Do you get him a
talented.
kickback?
No, I should ask him for it, though. He's a very talented
We'll
man.
strike that from the record.
Please don't ask for it on the record.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
there's no court reporter today.
All right, so, thanks everyone for that. In the meeting minutes, no other comments, and I guess we'll have, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
And a second?
Second.
All right, and we, go to vote there, Stephanie?
Sure. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion
Okay,
carries.
Great, thank you. All right, so we have the resolution for Bristol-Myers Squibb, PB 23-270. And it's, as usual, Steve, it's really well done. It's, this was a kind of it was relatively simple, but relatively complicated at the same time. I mean, it was, relatively few things that they were doing, but the details of it, are here, and it is kind of complicated. So, I only saw one, I'm trying to find it, and it was a question in my mind, is it a proper use of the word, or am I the one who's crazy? So if anyone else has any comments, maybe they can speak up while I search the document. Oh, yeah, here I found it. Okay, page 8, under item 12, going down 4 lines, and that line begins, the 4th line down from section 12, or item 12 there, is exposure to the panels would be frustrated. And I'm not sure what that, it's a word I'm not familiar with in this context.
Within existing paid parking
I'm not sure what that means, Steve, in this case, and it may be just one of those things where your overly smart word processor filled in something that you didn't intend.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My advice is don't ever accuse me of being overly smart. Because, no. I think frustrated in the sense that the canopies, the panels would not be getting the same magnitude of sunlight they would be.
That's what I
Otherwise.
thought the way I read it. I just wanted to be sure
Yeah.
if I was reading it correctly.
Frustrated, impeded,
Yeah.
diminished,
Yeah.
what have you.
Okay, that's the way I read it, but I said, maybe it's, a software gone awry. Okay, I think that was the only, other than correcting Michael to Dwight, that was the only thing only 2 things that I saw in here. And just to make sure I get to the end here. Let's see, so, I guess, sorry, I have one more question. Page 17, the top of page 17. It's really more of a question for the board and, in a sense, for Joe and maybe Matthew. At the top of the page, it says, over the existing zoning because the permit clearance for emergency vehicles and protect employees parking, solar canopies, et cetera. Is this something, that what came to my mind was, is this something we should consider modifying in the DRO? Is the height that we currently have in the DRO too low? And are we not being able to get emergency vehicles under there properly, or is it really based on a height for different reasons other than just emergency vehicles? So I'm not sure there's an answer to that question, but, Joe, I don't know if maybe you could take a look at that and see if there's a question there as to whether we do need to bring the DRO, change the DRO to a higher
I'll
height.
take a look at it
Under the
and
canopy.
report back at the next meeting.
Yeah, great, thanks. Sorry. I do, sir, still more questions. Matthew, page 18, item 4.
Page 18.
18, item 4. The applicant shall construct post-construction audit of proposed lighting fixtures within 90 days. I know we have lots of things like that. This is really a question for me and maybe for the rest of the board. How do we handle that when there's a post-construction evaluation? Does that go to the building inspector? Who actually does that?
Well, I mean, we have Colliers, who is overseeing the project to ensure it adheres with what was approved and as it begins to roll out in the field. We have had pre-construction meetings, obviously, to make sure from the building department's
Yeah.
perspective that everything is in order. We did that with Habitat, we do that with a number of applicants. So in this case, we would make a note of it, and between our engineering firm and the city's office to
Yeah.
make sure that
There's a
compliance
tickler
check takes
somewhere, you
place.
put this on a tickler
Yes.
list of some form, and I guess the same thing happens when we go back and do post-construction audit or evaluation of lighting, to be sure that the lighting's not
Yeah.
spilling over
Like,
from
for
one
example, I
property
think,
to the other.
yeah, I think in Moore's Habitat, they had a requirement that the lights couldn't exceed, I think, 15 feet as per the DRO. And as they were in construction, they went out and made sure that they did,
Okay.
in fact, they were including some of the bases, or they weren't, so there was a review of that.
Okay.
And that took place on site. But I've made note of it as well.
Yeah, okay, that's all the
Yep.
questions I had. I'm sorry I kind of jumped in there. Does anyone else have any questions or want to add anything to the comments? All right, I guess we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Jay, thank you, and
Second.
second, all right, John, thank you.
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. Balson Alvarez.
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great, thanks. Steve, thank you again for a really well-done resolution here.
My pleasure, thank you,
I now
Mr.
have
Chair.
a new way to use the word frustrated. Not that I'm ever frustrated by anything, of course. That's right. After all, I've been married for 33 years. Okay, so we're moving along, and next item on the agenda is, and I'm hoping Joe can help us out with this one, and Matthew as well, our pending ordinance amending Chapter 35 with regard to uniform housing affordability controls and compliance with the city's affordable housing obligations. So Joe, maybe you did a great job on the memo. Maybe you can kind of walk us through how this works and what the issues might have been given where we are in this.
Okay, certainly. Currently, the municipality has its affordable housing regulations in two different chapters. One is the Chapter 35, which is the development regulations, and the other is Chapter 8, which is entitled Affordable Housing. And it was decided, consistent with many, many other municipalities, to merge such regulations all into one. So anyone looking for affordable housing controls knows exactly where to find it. It'll be in one spot. At the same time, there are half a dozen or so modifications to the ordinance to address certain anomalies in the COA regulations that have provided some additional questions when somebody files an affordable housing plan, and also to update certain fees. For example, the residential development fee ordinance has historically been very low here. It was set at 1%. It's being increased to 1.5%. And as you can see from the memo we had provided, I think 11 of the 15 surrounding municipalities all have 1.5%. I can say out of the close to 50 municipalities that we represent, I think there's 3 that use the 1% factor. So you're going to be in line with the general trend here. The second issue was the non-residential development fees. They've been updated to be consistent with the new Non-Residential Development Fee Act. There's more technical stuff than anything else. More significant was the change with the insertion of the new Residential Development Amendment. What has happened in many instances, and not just here, but everywhere, developers got wise to the fact that if they just leave a foundation remaining after they tear down an existing building, they could get around having to submit development fees. And the development fees go towards helping the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we've adjusted that new residential development definition to make it clear that if someone just leaves a foundation or a portion of a foundation, that doesn't fly anymore, and they will be subject to that development fee ordinance. Most of the other changes are merely technical in nature and designed to clean up a few things. Your role here is to do a consistency review. And as you can see from our report, we identified how these amendments are all consistent with the master plan, the land use element, as well as the housing element and fair share plan. And there is nothing in either of those documents that would suggest that these amendments are in conflict with anything in those two plan elements. So consequently, you can report back to the governing body that this amendment is not inconsistent with the master plan elements.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's always a double negative.
All right. Any questions? Yeah.
Joe, just back on that, keeping the foundation or one wall gimmick that we see everywhere. Is the avoiding of the redevelopment fees the only reason that's done, or is there other tax reasons to your knowledge that people do that?
No, it's not so much tax reasons, but the other reason is that by saving a foundation, they might be able to get around an ordinance, a setback requirement if that foundation doesn't comply to code today.
Pre-existing condition.
A pre-existing condition, and it talks, and that goes to not only setbacks, but building coverage as well. So
Good question.
that's all tied together there.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's other reasons, then this may not be changing much behavior, but it may change some behavior. I don't know.
This may go beyond our scope, but do you know who drafted this resolution, Joe?
The ordinance was,
I'm looking through the ordinance.
yeah, the ordinance was prepared by Jeff Serenian's office. We had reviewed it after they prepared the initial draft.
All right. So he
And-
has expertise in this area.
Yes, for those who don't know Jeff Serenian, he is your affordable housing attorney, and he is usually lumped into a group of 3 people that are considered, the top in this field. And now that Ed Buzak is now working with Jeff Serenian, I guess there's 2 firms that are really considered.
Yeah.
And I'm not shortchanging our board attorney.
Well, thank you. Who sometimes elsewhere serves as affordable housing counsel as well, as you know, and has worked with you in that regard.
Yes.
But
But
that's-
Jeff,
Also not an endorsement, but go on.
but Jeff does this
We're not raising the
exclusively.
fee.
yeah, no, and, yeah, I would concur with, not that you need my concurrence, but yeah, that he and his firm, that is
All of it.
all they do.
Sounds exciting.
I'm fairly narrow in my expertise, I shouldn't say that, that's not a compliment. But as far as municipal land use and zoning, their firm is even further narrowed into a portion of municipal land use and zoning, which is affordable housing only. So-
Interesting. Okay.
So probably the right individual or individuals drafted the ordinance, but
Okay.
that goes beyond the scope of our authority with respect to master plan consistency.
Just interesting to know. Thanks. All right, can I have any other questions with regard to this ordinance? And may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, John. And a second?
Second.
Thank you,
I'll second.
Ellen. Second was Ellen. Let me go to the vote here.
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. Balson Alvarez.
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Steve, do you prepare the correspondence back to Rosemary?
Actually, as of late at least, I believe Stephanie's been doing that
Okay,
recently.
yeah.
It's a fairly standard with respect to not inconsistent, but I'm happy to help, review, what have you.
All right, great, thanks. I just wanted to be sure make sure I understood how that happened. Okay. So moving to the second ordinance that we have, with regard to the, as it says here, streets and sidewalks with regard to the 5G technology. Joe, maybe you can walk us through this one as well.
Certainly. This ordinance was designed to create an administrative process, and application requirements, design and siting criteria, fees, and enforcement mechanisms to accommodate 5G installations. The 5G installations, for those that might not be familiar with them, are a lot more sensitive than 4G was, and fortunately, they're a lot smaller, and the devices are much smaller, but they're a lot more sensitive, and the Federal Trade Commission and the FCC has prepared a model ordinance, which this is really used here to accommodate it. The issues are the same in terms of consistency, and this is one of the things that neither the master plan, the land use element and fair share plan really had nothing to say about this issue, so therefore it clearly is not inconsistent with the master plan. But we can point to 4 or 5 specific goals that parenthetically touch upon the issue. One is that one of the goals of the master plan is to promote a desirable visual environment. These facilities are much smaller and not as obtrusive, visually obtrusive, in the way they can be placed on a building or on a pole, is much less visually in your face than historically has been the case. Another goal of the master plan talks about having a desirable location for office and research uses because of the major, regional center that Summit has become. This is another means to attract, research facilities, for example. There's a couple other goals and objectives that they're not as significant as those two. But suffice it to say that based on the goals and objectives that we do have, a number of them are being furthered by this kind of ordinance, and there's certainly no inconsistency between this and the master plan that we have.
I didn't realize that when we all took on 5G, we thought it would be so great. I didn't realize that it would, shorter distances required more repeaters, and I didn't understand the technology of it. And when I first read this, I looked at it and said, in the public right-of-way. What are these things doing in the public right-of-way? And as you say, on top of telephone poles or whatever else, they show up in all kinds of places, and I just hadn't focused on that, so
Yeah.
it's, interesting.
The
What the-
good news is they're smaller, the bad news is there's more of them.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But part of the good news is they're required to have multiple elements on any one pole.
Right.
And that's a mandate of the code.
So what can the city do in this case if it found something objectionable? This doesn't seem to have much teeth in it, and I'm thinking about it as a
Agreed.
general question, but what
Yeah.
is it,
Right.
what do we actually get out of this, to be blunt about it?
You get consistency with the federal government,
Yeah.
because the federal government rules on this issue.
Yeah.
And they've really made these determinations. There is, somewhere in the ordinance, it talks about when the municipality does review these applications, they can impose reasonableness in their assessment as to whether it does represent a visual impairment or not. And I'm sure that's where, I guess, the added fees for the attorney will come into play, because there are no hard and fast regulations that we can mandate in this code that would not run afoul of the federal government's legislation.
So Steve, have you
So-
seen in your
sorry.
practice, I'm sorry, Jennifer, go ahead, have you seen in your practice an issue with a municipality not agreeing with Verizon, for example, and not being reasonable?
It was easier 20 years ago, when I won a few of these cases, back in the old 4G days, than it is now. Since I'm not solely an expert on affordable housing, and I have expertise in other areas of land use and zoning, I have some expertise in the area of wireless technology and these types of cases. The problem, without getting into too much detail, is Joe was working around the P word, preemption. We all know what that means. We are federally preempted
It can
in
make
this
you
area.
frustrated.
It's probably, it can make you very frustrated, absolutely, it made me very frustrated. But, and the law over the last 10 years in particular, it was just a decision out of Pennsylvania, but it was the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that governs us, made it even easier for the wireless companies to win on what's called effective prohibition claims. So while we can have some control over reasonable regulations, frankly, if it arises to the level of effective prohibition of services for wireless carriers, we can be in trouble. So the long and the short of it is unlike most areas of zoning where the municipality has primary authority and great discretion, in the area of wireless technology and it's federally, there's federal preemption, and we have frankly very little, particularly nowadays. So, and I don't anticipate that the trend that we've been seeing over the last 10 to 15 years is gonna turn any.
Gotcha.
So,
Jennifer, I'm sorry, I cut you off there, so what's your question?
The one thing that we do have is the 106 review, which anytime federal funds are, or federal permits, anything federal, 106 review kicks in for historic district, so, or historic sites. So we have a downtown listed on the National Register. So I'm just wondering if we can just put, to your point exactly, anything in here to be a little more descriptive at least, for number 6. There's in a page number. Number 6 under A, or B, excuse me, where it says minimize impacts and detriments to historic character of the city, including the historic downtown, which is a registered national and state historic district, whether we could add a little more.
Hey, Jennifer,
color there.
tell us where you are again.
yeah.
This is
It's the ordinance.
the ordinance,
Yeah.
and then it's like 1, 2, third page.
18-13 what?
So it's 18-13.1, purpose and scope, and then
Number 6.
B6.
Oh, I see, got you, all right, thank you. Minimize impacts, yeah.
I think, you know, we have some
Oh, I see.
reasonable standing for our downtown since it's on the National Register, where maybe we could add something to give that a little more color, maybe not teeth, but at least a little more descriptor, such as, maybe, you could say, which is a registered local and state historic district, and the local historic districts and sites by locating new installations outside of view sheds of said historic districts and sites. Or you could say, at a minimum, installations must not be visible from public right-of-ways in historic districts. Giving you something. Now, I don't know how small they are, but if you're clustering them, maybe the impacts aren't. But the old 4G ones, I used to review some of these for the FCC,
Oh, huh.
and they would put them right at the cornice line, so they were totally visible. When you could just set them back 15 feet, they'd still work, but you'd not see them at all. So it's like a simple like setback requirement, or a simple, you know,
Or
Alternative
attractive
location.
clothing, an attractive cloaking maybe? I mean.
I'm sorry?
An attractive cloaking. I mean, if you
Oh,
want to.
no, cloaking, that, no, I think that would just make it bigger. But it's you mean covering it up?
Oh, yeah, I mean, hiding it, whatever. You know, the fake trees, the
Fake trees,
camouflage.
the fake trees, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that for an individual pole, right. I'm thinking of the ones that are being attached on top of buildings and on top of poles and things like that. The ones that I reviewed were on buildings in historic districts. And it was just such an easy fix to have no impact versus having a really, you know, they'd have like 20 of these things right on the cornice in a downtown, like, wow, that makes an impact. So I'm just wondering if we could talk about maybe adding some language here to help a little, like just setbacks or view sheds or something to give staff or anybody
I
some
mean,
guidance on what we're talking about.
Theoretically, the way this process is supposed to work is it comes to us for our review, and we have the opportunity to provide comments back to the governing body, and they can accept them or not accept them, and to not accept them, they need a supermajority. Is that the?
So would we
the way that
get to
works?
review all of these, or is it a staff level review?
Well, a couple of things. First, on the, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure,
On the master plan consistency review, presumably what's being discussed is a finding that it is not inconsistent with the master plan, but perhaps an additional recommendation.
Right, for
Given that
additional
there,
language, yeah.
Yeah,
given that there would be, under that scenario, a finding of not inconsistent, there's nothing for the governing body to have a supermajority and a rules,
If we
a reasons resolution to override us, so to speak,
Okay, I get
in order for the ordinance to be adopted.
I get you.
Number one. Number two, with respect to those, we do have a leeway under the language, D26, to go beyond simply, is it not inconsistent or is it inconsistent with the master plan? And raise additional matters or make additional recommendations. My general guidance in that regard would be, rather than propose language changes, particularly to the intent section, which is really just a general intent section, even with respect to the
Oh, right,
historic.
okay.
Might be just to inquire as to any potential additional restrictions that might be able to be included within, or regulations included within the ordinance with respect to installations within historic districts. I just lost the page, but to, yeah, or within the historic downtown district. Just to, because I'd be sensitive to even proposing modifications to the ordinance, given that those modifications could run afoul of federal preemption and the like. I think it's best left in the hands of the ordinance scrivener to know what the concerns are of the board.
So
that makes
how would we communicate that? Is that
We could literally,
Anyway.
and I can help with that we can, if that's the desire of the board, simply to say we find it, the ordinance to be not inconsistent with the master plan, and make the following additional recommendation.
And
or
that might
request.
be included in the DRO perhaps, or
Oh, and it would just be to the governing body to inquire as to what, if any, further regulation there could be with respect to installations in the historic downtown, by way of example, setback requirements or the like, for the purpose of, and I'm getting into the planning aspects, I guess, but the Joe could probably say it better, but purposes of promoting a desirable visual environment or
Right.
minimizing aesthetic detriment or what
And
have you.
then if you added just to the extent feasible,
To the extent fees, yeah.
at least that gives the municipality the out if they
In
afford
my
guess the
it.
world,
que-
whenever you write that, they just do what they want.
yeah, that's,
Seriously.
Did you take a look at where the pole requirements are?
Yeah, I was-
There's a,
Sorry?
if you
Yeah.
go to section 18-13.8, and then you go down,
1C,
poles,
Yeah.
1C.
yeah.
There's
Under
something, it says something. I'm not
Design
saying it's-
requirements part, that's where,
Um,
is that where you are?
Citing requirements, and then it talks
Okay.
about poles, and it says about putting them on light fixtures, but I don't
Yeah,
know if that's
existing
what you
ones.
want.
So, but for the purpose of what the planning board would recommend to council would be that, while yes, we feel that this is not inconsistent with the master plan, you're saying we would recommend that where the city engineer approves, or we're getting into specific request for insertion of a line that talks
Well,
about?
I'm not gonna recommend anything, but if the if the planning board wishes to inquire as to whether there can be further regulation with respect to installations in the historic downtown, specifically to minimize visual detriment, that's a request, or, you know, that the board can add to its not inconsistent with the master plan finding. You're allowed to do that.
so under the polls, you have A, B, C, and under polls,
Yeah.
if everybody's there, C, polls in the historic downtown shall be pre-approved lighting fixture or other city-approved fixture or pole intended to match existing fixtures, which shall be installed in place of an existing fixture. So we're sort of hitting around it, but maybe not exactly what you're aiming at, Jennifer. It seems that there's some recognition that.
I think I'm more worried about the roof-mounted equipment than the pole, because I'm hoping the pre-approved pole will probably get vetted by staff or somebody, and hopefully that's not gonna be a problem, but then you go to the next, if you go to design requirements, and then you go to, there's design requirements, and then pole-mounted, and then roof-mounted. Flat roof area.
Prohibited.
And design requirements under E, all
Where does it
wireless
say that?
facilities
Right here,
in
it
the
says-
public right-of-way shall be
Installation or
fully
co-location
concealed in a
of
manner
wireless
approved by the
facilities
city.
or buildings or structural facades is prohibited.
That's
And
good.
it
Yeah,
says,
that's-
The installation of
under top of
co-location
public
small,
buildings, structure must be placed
not
on.
visible to public. And B, could be
Where's that, where did you just read that, John?
Four C, Bill.
So
Oh, okay,
it's
4D,
not
4E.
permitted if then they're
4E.
talking about how to
4E.
conceal it.
Oh, I see, yeah, okay, thanks.
Jennifer, have you seen design requirements for E?
I'm seeing,
Yeah, that's where we're
Sorry.
at now.
Yeah.
so 4, yeah, and then there's design requirements, but then if you keep going to the next page, under big E, not little e, there's roof-mounted equipment. And
Kinda
it's-
is contradictory.
And it says it prohibited A, small a, but then it goes on to say how it needs to be concealed.
No, it's only
Maybe we
permitted
could
on,
work on the roof one.
This is not visible to the public.
it's only permitted on public buildings.
It says installation on buildings or structures is prohibited. Maybe it should say privately owned buildings and structures? Just to
Under-
differentiate, so it's clear?
Yeah, under A,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
because we could just end at A if that was all building.
So it's prohibited on private. it's allowed on public, but it's gotta be fully concealed and not visible to the public. In B, right?
Wait, it's prohibited on private?
Well, it says the installation, or look at roof-mounted equipment,
Yep,
big E, then little
Right.
a.
yep.
Yeah.
Installation or co-location of small wireless facilities on building or structure facades is prohibited.
That's facades, not roofs.
Right.
On building or structure facades.
Right,
Yeah.
using the word.
Oh, just
building as
facades
the
is
same
the,
as
right,
structure.
right, facades. That's good, okay. And then insulation, got it, okay. Small roof
It's
or top of
concealed
buildings.
and not visible to public.
Why don't they just set it back so it's not visible from the public
Well,
right
it says
away?
small wireless facility on the roof or top of building or structure must be
35
placed on
feet.
flat area and at least 35 feet or taller and fully screened from public view.
Yeah, I think
That,
screen
that's
from
not a
public.
setback, that's a height.
Yeah.
Right.
Or it has something massive.
Basically, it could be setback or concealed, because setbacks are better, because then you don't have to do any concealment and it doesn't show. I'm just advocating for that, because I've seen it so many times, like, why didn't they just set this back 20 feet? We wouldn't have an issue.
Does screening mean just some sort of?
It's like
Just
some
don't
sort
see-
of
but it
buffer.
could be like a metal plate, right?
Right.
It's like some sort of buffer.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, but that can be,
Which could be just as unsightly.
right.
Potentially, yeah.
Right, so why not just set it back? I would definitely ask that we put in setback somewhere on top of building, so it's not out of the public right of way. Because like downtown, picture downtown, you know, if it's on the edge in the front and concealed, you're still gonna see that concealment. Don't get too nervous, I used to review these at 106
No,
level.
that's fine,
It's-
that's fine. I'm not nervous, I'm just
It'll
waiting.
get reviewed if it's federally funded or permitted anyway at the SHPO, but they get an awful lot of these. So unless we get a little more proactive or some language in there, it's gonna be right on the front of the building again, because it doesn't get knocked down unless they were having a really good day.
So,
All I was gonna say, as I think everyone knows, is and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, it's still line of sight technology, right?
Correct.
So you have to be careful with setbacks, obviously could frustrate, no pun intended, the line of sight, so the technology doesn't work, and then that becomes problematic.
You can move
But,
it.
but,
I know.
but I think the feasible language suggested by our planner is good language.
so, but we would incorporate the idea of a setback if feasible, is what we're saying. If feasible would be from a technological perspective, you know, line of sight. You know, if it can get from point A to point B, that's one thing. If
Do we have
setting it
any
back-
idea what these actually look like?
Yeah.
The size and the scope of them, and scale rather, what they look like?
I wish I had a picture.
How quickly is the technology changing? What is today for an antenna? look
Yeah,
like?
6G,
Different.
7G,
6 months.
yeah.
Well, not even the 5G.
5G's already
before
like,
5G,
5G's already.
That same antenna
out
itself
there.
may be a very different thing.
Mhm.
A year or two, is it gonna just be a wire
Yeah.
that you could insert in the facade or something
Right.
like that? I don't know.
Wouldn't
but-
that be great? Then we wouldn't
It
care.
probably won't be, but what is the?
Yeah, that probably is the future. But right now, I would just urge, because if you put in any of that caveat language, then they'll never listen to any of it. That's my experience. But, because they'll push back anyway. Even if we say, no, this must be set back 15, pick your number, out of the public right of way, they'll still push back anyway. But if you say, if possible, then they're not even in the conversation. They're just gonna do their plan.
That's human nature.
I just
So-
Googled, where's the best place to put a 5G antenna? It says it has to be as high as possible, ideally above the roof line. Ugh.
But if it's set back above the roof line, you won't see it. If it's set on the face of, you know, right in the front on the street line, then it's
Yeah.
problematic. So it could make a big difference.
So I guess, rather than us trying to draft
Set 'em
this
apiece.
here, as we're doing it, is there a chance that Jennifer, you and Steve can work on the language, or we need to say something here from the perspective?
It's really a recommendation to the governing body, and
Yeah.
just to be clear, when I said the if feasible, or when I adopted the Burgess rule of feasibility, I was using that language not as, to be incorporated into a proposed amendment to the ordinance.
Oh,
which has-
good.
I was talking about in our direction or request to the governing body as a board, if feasible. Because there are a lot of things that someone who's drafting this is taking into account when they're drafting it. So if I understand the goal correctly, the goal is, be it setback or otherwise, to make it as visually
Not public from the public.
less
right. Not
intrusive
visible
as
from-
possible. So I think, we could make that recommendation, whether Joe drafts it, I draft it, anyone drafts it, we could circulate it. It won't be complicated. It's a sentence or two to the governing body, just so that it encapsulates the wish of this board to screen from public view as best as possible, as much as possible,
That's great.
these facilities, particularly in the downtown.
I think they already said
Historic district.
screened. I think we're looking for setback. I think they already said screening.
Yeah.
Well,
They
then-
offered
then-
screening.
Then setback, as
Cool.
as much as possible.
Thank you, Steve. All right.
But
So,
I'll write a sentence or two if that's what the board wishes.
yeah, I think we have the general idea of what the board is trying to do, and, Rick?
Forgive my ignorance, but how many public buildings are there in the historic district?
I don't think it's just public buildings. I think we
Okay, but
figured
I
out
thought
it's
if
not
we were
just.
prohibiting the use in private buildings.
Yeah,
saying
I don't think we can
I don't-
prohibit
I
it
don't
in
think it
private
said
buildings.
You
It's
can't do
just
that,
the
okay.
facade.
Yeah.
I've misunderstood the prior
Yeah.
conversation then,
It's just that you can't do it on the facade.
on the facade.
Yeah,
There was a
everything.
Because
misunderstanding.
the images, when you Google the images part, are hideous, and they're all tall and big.
Well, and also, if you can't put them on a building, then you start to get into, even if it's
Poles.
a pre-approved, the poles
Yeah.
aren't beautiful because it's early in the technology.
Right.
So any pole that the city could pre-approve is still probably not fantastic. It's a gigantic,
Understood.
weird-looking, hide a thing in a tree, fake tree-looking thing. So that's probably also wouldn't be terribly pleasant looking down the street either, so.
Right.
And then the corollary question on the horizontal distance between, which is referenced here in some portion. Just wondering if they could be prohibited completely within the historic district? And just not get in the face of the dimensional distances that have to take place. For instance, if there were one on the library or the Y, or in the parking garage,
Just hold it mounted on the garage.
for example, if there could be like a coterminous prohibition district without getting in the face because it doesn't fly in the face of the horizontal distance. Just wondering as a way of getting around the fact that there's,
There is something in there about how the city can provide an alternate location in the right of way within 100 feet of the location, if it is a designated historic district, so
Yeah.
you try and push it
yeah,
out
that kind of
100
thing.
feet.
Or on page 18-1312, it's,
Waivers.
basis of application denial, J6, fails to comply with applicable codes. That's what we're talking about. Can there be a code, not historic preservation commission doesn't have much teeth, but can there be a code that says nothing
Yeah.
like this in the historic district?
Yeah.
Well, if there's a 500-foot necessity for radio to radio or tower to tower,
Yeah.
and they have federal preemption right, I'm not sure you can say that,
Well, because you also expand the district, which is
Yeah.
what I do.
I do think if you get the setback so that it's on top of the
Yeah.
taller historic building, which is where they're gonna want it, and they're set back enough, it's not gonna affect anybody's vision, it'll be fine. The other thing we didn't talk about is, how do we review, Joe, how is the proposed polls being reviewed
City-
at city staff, the polls that are gonna accommodate for the rest of the town where the downtown is not? How are those polls gonna be
Being
reviewed?
reviewed, they're internal to the staff.
Sorry,
It's internal to the staff.
that's what I thought, okay,
It doesn't come before the board, is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
right, and what if they get polls that are terrible? They somehow think they're really gonna compromise neighborhoods or compromise the look of Summit, what recourse do they have?
They could reject the application, but then it goes to, bear with me one second.
I have no idea what they'd look like.
I think it's 18-13, which is PC 10J.
So it says,
They report back to the governing body, and they have to act, it's the governing body that makes the final determination.
Yes, with notification of denials from Sumner Common Council, if they deny
But
it.
I don't know what happens if they deny.
How does this ever get bubbled up to the council from that perspective?
The city engineer or designee, after review of the application in 18-13.10I, that's
Yeah, but what happens?
18-13.10I, talks
gotta
about the
quit it.
recommendation by city engineer, his or her designee.
So if he determines that he wants to deny the application, I guess that has to be reported to the common council. And they have to review and approve or disapprove that application, that response. Okay, wow.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but if the council denies, and they cannot come to a meeting of the minds, because there's a step where the applicant can revise their plans, but if they still aren't accepted, I guess you end up in court.
Federal court, by the way.
It just sounds like an important review process for the polls, because it says they all have to be consistent, so it's like they just have to drill down on that initial design review and hopefully do a really good job, and then we'll see them everywhere.
Well, I've made a note just to dig into the process of what is on the market and what could be selected by the city for that pre-approved poll.
That's a great idea,
which
because
would
you could probably
include-
get,
Yeah.
design 1, ugh, and then design 10 over here is really great,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
get the
I'll-
right one, yeah.
And
That's a
include
good idea.
stakeholders and, yeah, so.
So at this point, what we want to do is draft, as you suggest, Steve, a sentence or two that goes back. We're saying that is consistent, is not inconsistent. And we're setting back, say, with this sentence or two, describing what it is that we're looking for in terms of concealment and more particularly in terms of setback. And that's something that you're going to do. This is something we're going to draft. And I guess with Stephanie's help, maybe Matt as well. Is that acceptable to the board tonight? Is that something that seems to
Yeah.
work for everybody?
Yeah, just recommended
Okay.
language to
Yeah.
add, yeah.
Okay. All right, so do we, with regard to the, our requirement as a board to vote on this tonight, it would be we would vote on this subject to those
Yeah,
improvements.
it'll be in the letter to the governing body.
All right. All right, under that condition, can I have a motion to approve, subject to, as we said?
So
Motion?
moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jay. Jay, did you made the motion?
Yes, I said yes,
Yeah, and-
yes.
and-
So moved, yes.
And Paul's second.
And Paul,
Okay,
yes,
great, thanks.
second.
Okay. You have to vote, Stephanie, thanks.
And a roll call vote.
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. Balson Alvarez.
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Good, thank you. All right, we have, we wanted to go into an executive session briefly. And Steve, give me some advice here. I don't think we want to talk about the RFQs that have been presented to us from the various professionals. And I don't think that we need Joe or Marie or you here to do that, right?
These are the RFPs for all
Yes.
board professionals. You could simply announce that you're going into executive session. Do we have a resolution to do that, or at least a verbal resolution to do that?
Oh, and we will not be making any decisions coming out of executive session either. So
Well-
it's really simply just to go in
To
and to
discuss.
deliberate and
Right.
discuss, and then come back out and then close the meeting.
So there would be a motion to go into executive session for personnel and contract matters, which is one of the exceptions to the Open Public Meetings Act.
Yeah.
And that would, a motion, a second, and the information that's provided and discussed in the executive session will be available to the public once such information is no longer required to be protected by confidentiality and privilege and can be revealed consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act. That would be the motion. If somebody makes a motion, a second, a roll call vote, you can go into executive session and the professionals can leave.
Okay, so given what Steve just said, to make a motion, yeah, we agree with you, Steve. A motion is to do what Steve said.
So moved.
And a second? All right, thank you.
Can I get this at home? No.
Yeah.
No, and,
Thank you all very much.
actually, a voice vote is fine to go in
All right,
this one.
let's do the voice vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Great.
All right, great.
Thank
Joe
you.
and Marie, thank you very much. Steve, thank you very much.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thanks, Steve.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Uploading all these dates to my calendar.
Oh, yes, that's right. All right, okay, so, your board chair has failed to review
So
Yes.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay. Thanks, Stephanie. All right,
All right, and we're back on, just so you know.
we're back up. Okay, so last item on the agenda tonight is the planning board schedule for 2024. Stephanie has provided on our chairs here tonight is a slightly revised schedule for the month of December, moving it, the December meeting to December 18th. Is that adequate notice time, the December 17th notice publishing date, and then having the meeting the next day?
Oh, I'm sorry, I never changed it when I, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
So it should be, it should be like the 7th.
That's all right. That was the only thing that I saw. The rest of it looks fine.
So it would be the 6th, it would fall on the 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what are we looking at?
The
Post.
December, this would be 6th, not the 17th, because these were too close.
Good
Moving
catch.
from the
Oh, okay,
23rd to the
okay,
18th.
right, but for our purposes, we need to know the date, we need to calendar the date, but,
It's
Just the
18th.
right-hand side.
Yeah, that's us.
right.
So she needs to move this notice.
Oh, and you highlighted the top of it was right.
December
needs to be
6th.
updated, right.
Okay. All right.
It's possible we won't, if we're not busy, we won't have an August meeting like we have in the past missed.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna hope for that, because I know I'm gonna be out of town on that date.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so do we do a roll call vote for the calendar or voice vote?
Are we gonna approve this at this meeting, or would it be at the next meeting?
You can approve it, why not?
Oh, yeah.
I don't really know why not.
I just said as approved by the planning board, oh, no.
That was last year.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
oh,
it was
yeah,
last
okay.
year, so I just
With,
said-
you had done it in December, so I just, yeah,
Yeah.
oh,
Whatever.
sure, whatever.
It's ready, we can go with it.
All right, okay, so the motion is to approve this 2024 schedule.
Anybody check out the school schedule?
Do we need it? We've got a motion and a second on this.
February.
Do we need a motion? Motion from Paul and a second from Paul.
Second.
All right, I'm signing second. And, all right, so let's do a voice vote, or do we need to do a roll call on this?
I think we need a roll call.
All right, sure.
I'll do the roll call. Okay. Chairman Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff?
Yes.
Ms. Balson Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker?
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli?
Yes.
Mr. Stern?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great, all right. Now I need a motion to adjourn, unless anyone has any other business before the,
I move to adjourn.
all right, and a second? All right. Then we need a voice
All
vote?
those, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.